Ever get that feeling like the future of money is literally right there in your pocket? Like you could be mining crypto just by tapping on your phone.
Yeah, well, that's the whole idea behind Pi Network, right?
Right. And get this, they claim to have 60 million users. 60 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's more people than like California and Texas put together, I think.
It's wild. So that's the big question, right? Is this thing the next big thing in digital cash, or is it just like a digital fidget spinner? Fun to play with, but ultimately,
Yeah, just a fad.
Exactly. And that's why we're here today. We're going deep on Pi Network and its very own Pi coin.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of reports and analyses, and we're going to try to make sense of it all for you.
No blockchain jargon overload, I promise. We'll keep it real.
Absolutely.
So what are we actually going to be looking at today? Well, for starters, we've got to understand what makes Pi Network tick.
Yeah, the tech behind it, how they plan to grow, and what their community is all about.
And of course, the million-dollar question. Can you actually use Pi coin to buy stuff in the real world?
Yeah, can you actually do something with it? We'll get into all that.
Plus, we'll dive into the predictions. Some are pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, the whole is Pi Network a scam debate. We're tackling it all.
No stone unturned.
Buckle up, folks. This is going to be a ride. So, Pi Network. This thing is all about mining crypto on your phone. No massive energy-guzzling rigs, right?
Right. That's their big pitch mining that's accessible to everyone and doesn't fry your battery in the process.
Totally different from the Bitcoin world, where you need a small power plant just to get started. So how do they actually pull that off?
Well, it all comes down to the technology they're using called the Stellar Consensus Protocol, or SCP for short.
SCP? Sounds kind of mysterious. What's so special about it?
Well, think about traditional Bitcoin mining. It's basically a giant global competition to solve incredibly complex math problems. The first to crack the code gets to add the next block to the blockchain.
Right, and that takes a ton of computing power, which means a ton of energy.
Exactly. Now, SCP flips the script completely. Instead of this intense computational battle, it's more about building trust and consensus within the network.
Interesting. So less about crunching numbers, more about establishing trust. How does that even work?
Well, imagine a kind of digital neighborhood watch. Instead of solving complex puzzles, SCP relies on users forming what they call security circles.
Security circles? Okay, I'm intrigued.
These circles are made up of people you trust within the network. And the idea is that if enough people within your circle vouch for a transaction, it's considered valid.
Oh, I get it. So it's like your friends are confirming that you're not trying to pull a fast one.
Precisely. And all these interconnected security circles, when you zoom out, they form a giant web of trust across the entire network. And that web, that's what helps verify transactions without needing all that massive computational power.
Okay, so it's basically replacing raw computing power with this sort of collective social trust. Kind of brilliant, actually.
Yeah, it's a pretty innovative approach. And in a world that's increasingly concerned about the environmental impact of crypto mining, this makes Pi Network stand out.
Definitely. The eco-friendly angle is a big plus these days. But let's be real, Pi Network didn't just spring up overnight, fully formed. They've been on quite a journey, right?
Right. They've actually been rolling out their platform in phases, 3 phases to be exact.
Okay, tell me more about these phases.
All right, so phase 1 was all about laying the groundwork. The beta phase, they called it, ran from 2018 to 2020.
The early days.
Yeah, getting the app out there, building up that initial community, testing the waters.
Okay, so beta testing, community building.
Yeah.
What came next?
Then they moved on to phase 2, the testnet phase. This was from 2020 to 2021.
Testnet. So like a trial run for the real deal.
Exactly. They launched a live version of the Pi blockchain, but not with actual Pi coins, more like test coins, so they could really put the system through its paces.
I see. So a chance to iron out any wrinkles before going live with real money on the line.
Yeah, stress testing, making sure it could handle the load, all that.
And then the big moment, phase 3, the mainnet launch.
Right, and that happened in 2021. But even then, they didn't just fling the doors wide open.
Oh, what did they do?
They had this period called the enclosed network, which ran from December 2021 all the way to February 20th, 2025.
Enclosed network. So the mainnet was running, but it was kind of cordoned off.
Exactly. Think of it like a soft launch. The real Pi blockchain was live, but it was walled off from the outside world.
I guess that makes sense. Kind of like a final test phase to make sure everything is running smoothly before the big unveiling.
That's the idea. They wanted to give users time to go through the KYC process, know your customer to verify their identities.
Right. That's pretty standard in the crypto world these days.
Yeah, and it gave them time to encourage developers to start building apps and utilities that could run on the Pi network. Plus, they had to figure out how to migrate all those Pi balances that people had mined onto this new live blockchain. They actually hit some pretty impressive milestones during this enclosed network period. Over 19 million users got KYC verified, and over 10 million actually moved their Pi onto the mainnet.
Wow, those are some serious numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, so fast forward to February 20th of this year. What happened then? Did the walls finally come down?
They sure did. February 20th was the official launch of the open network. The Pi network was finally connected to the outside world.
The big debut.
Exactly. In theory, this means users can now send Pi to each other freely and potentially even interact with other blockchains. Plus, it opens up the possibility of Pi coin being traded on those big cryptocurrency exchanges.
Ah, so that's what everyone's been waiting for, the chance to buy and sell Pi on the open market.
Yep, that's the potential game changer. Now, we've been talking about these impressive user numbers, but how does Pi Network actually stack up? Do they really have this massive community of dedicated users, or is it more hype than reality?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that they claim over 60 million pioneers, as they call them. But there's always a bit of skepticism around those big numbers, right?
Right, because a big registered user base doesn't automatically translate to a thriving, active community. It's kind of like those social media platforms that boast millions of users, but a lot of them are probably inactive accounts.
Exactly. So what's the real story with Pi Network's community?
Well, while that 60 million number is certainly attention-grabbing, it's important to dig a little deeper. When you look at blockchain explorers like ExplorePi, these are tools that track activity on the blockchain. They show a much smaller number of actual Pi wallets, something like 9 million, which is a pretty significant difference.
So maybe not everyone who downloaded the app is fully engaged.
That's likely the case. Think of it like downloading a fitness app. Lots of people do it, but how many actually use it consistently?
Yeah, good point. So a lot of potential Pi users out there, but maybe not all of them are actively involved in the network.
Right, and even among the active users, the question becomes, are they actually using PiCoin for anything? Because ultimately, that's what matters.
Okay, so let's talk about utility. Can you actually use PiCoin for anything beyond just hoping it goes up in value? What can you actually buy with this thing?
That's the real test, isn't it? And Pi Network has been putting a lot of effort into building out what they call their ecosystem. They've got the Pi browser, which is designed to be your gateway to decentralized applications, or dApps, within the Pi network.
dApps, like little programs that run on the blockchain, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they've got the Pi wallet, which is where you store your Pi securely. But the most interesting development is probably the Pi marketplace.
Pi Marketplace. Sounds kind of like a digital swap meet.
That's a great way to put it. It's designed to be a platform where users can buy and sell goods and services directly using PiCoin. Think of it as a kind of community-driven barter system.
Oh, so I could trade my Pi for like a virtual coffee or maybe even real-world stuff if the seller accepts Pi.
Exactly. And they've been running these events called Pi Fest, where they showcase people actually using Pi for real-world transactions, people buying crafts, digital services, all sorts of things.
So they're trying to show that Pi can actually be used for real commerce, not just speculation.
Exactly. They want to build a real economy around Pi, not just a bunch of numbers on a screen. And their ambitions go even further. They talk about integrating with major online retailers, making it possible to spend Pi on, say, Amazon.
Whoa, now that would be a game changer. Shopping on Amazon with Pi you mined on your phone? Pretty wild.
Yeah, that's the vision. And because crypto transactions are generally very cheap, they also see PiCoin as a potential solution for global remittances. You know, sending money across borders quickly and affordably.
Yeah, that's a huge market that traditional financial institutions haven't quite cracked.
Exactly. And then there's the potential for integration with DeFi, decentralized finance. Think lending, borrowing, all those financial tools, but running on the blockchain, powered by Pi.
DeFi is definitely the hot topic these days. So they're trying to position PiCoin as a sort of all-purpose cryptocurrency that can be used for all sorts of things.
Yeah, that's the big picture they're painting. But let's be honest, getting people to actually use a new cryptocurrency is tough.
It's one thing to have the tech and the vision, but getting real-world adoption is a whole different ballgame.
You said it. So how do they plan to actually get people using PiCoin?
I mean, partnerships seem like a key ingredient, right?
Yeah.
Like teaming up with established players in the tech and retail world. Have they made any moves in that direction?
Yeah, they've made some interesting partnerships. One that stands out is their collaboration with the Stellar Network.
Stellar, as in the cryptocurrency Stellar Lumens.
That's the one. And this partnership is all about exploring the possibility of launching a stablecoin pegged to Pi coin.
A stable coin, meaning its value would be tied to something stable, like the US dollar.
Exactly. So instead of Pi's price fluctuating wildly, as cryptocurrencies tend to do, this stablecoin would be designed to hold a more predictable value.
Makes sense.
Uh-huh.
That would definitely make Pi coin more attractive for everyday transactions.
Exactly. No one wants to buy a cup of coffee with a coin that might be worth half as much tomorrow.
Exactly. Stablecoins are definitely a big part of the crypto conversation these days. Any other notable partnerships we should know about?
Well, they've also teamed up with Telegram.
Telegram, the messaging app.
Yep. The one with hundreds of millions of users worldwide.
Smart move. That's a huge potential audience for Pi.
Right. It gives them a platform to spread awareness and potentially onboard a ton of new users.
So awareness is one thing, but what about actual access to Pi coin? Where can people buy and sell it right now?
Well, currently, Pi is listed on a few exchanges like OKX, Bitdit, Gate.io, MEXE, and PiNX. These are platforms where people can trade cryptocurrencies.
Okay, so it's out there, but not exactly on the biggest stages yet.
Right. And you know what everyone's wondering?
What about Binance?
Exactly. Binance is the giant in the room, the world's largest crypto exchange.
And Pi coin isn't listed there.
Nope. And that's a big point of discussion in the Pi community.
Yeah, I bet. Getting listed on Binance would be a huge boost for Pi.
Absolutely. It would give them instant credibility and access to a massive pool of potential buyers and sellers.
So why aren't they listed on Binance?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation, but Binance hasn't given a clear answer.
Mysterious. Makes you wonder if they have concerns about Pi network.
Possibly. You know, there have been some pretty serious allegations floating around.
Oh yeah, the whole is Pi a scam thing. Can't ignore that.
Absolutely not. We'll dive into that in a bit, but first, let's talk about something a little more hopeful.
Okay, you mean like predictions?
Exactly. Everyone wants to know, will Pi coin make them rich? So what are the experts saying about its potential value in the future?
Yeah, let's peer into that crystal ball and see what we find.
Okay, first, a word of caution. Predicting the price of any cryptocurrency is basically a shot in the dark.
Oh yeah, crypto's notoriously volatile. One day you're up, the next you're down.
Exactly. But that doesn't stop people from trying to predict the future.
So what are some of the predictions for Pi coin? Are we talking Lambos and yachts? Or ramen noodles for life?
Well, there's definitely a range of opinions out there. Some are pretty optimistic, especially in the short term. For example, CoinCodex, a crypto analytics platform, projected a possible 291% increase in Pi coin's price by April 26th of this year.
Wow, 291%. That's a pretty bold prediction. What would that put the price at?
Around $2.83 per Pi coin.
Okay, not quite Lambo money, but definitely a significant jump. What other short-term predictions are out there?
Watcher Guru, another crypto news site, suggested a potential high of $3.94 in April.
Interesting. So both predictions see Pi coin making some gains this month, but those are just short-term guesses, right?
Yeah.
What about the long game? What do people think Pi coin might be worth in, say, 5 or 10 years?
Now, that's where things get really speculative. But some analysts are painting a very rosy picture. For instance, Fortune India published an article suggesting that Pi coin could potentially be worth over $500 by 2030.
$500 per Pi. Now we're talking.
Yeah, but that's a huge if. They're basically saying that for Pi to reach those kinds of prices, it needs to achieve widespread adoption.
Right. People actually using Pi for real transactions, businesses accepting it, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And of course, it would need to be listed on those major exchanges like Binance. That would give it a huge boost in credibility and liquidity.
Makes sense. But let's be real, there are probably some skeptics out there too, right? People who aren't so convinced that Pi coin is going to the moon.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole other side to this story.
Let's hear it. What are the Pi doubters saying?
Well, for starters, remember how Pi coin initially dipped in price when it was first listed on those smaller exchanges?
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Right. Well, that price drop was partly because a lot of early Pi miners decided to cash out once they finally had the chance.
Makes sense. They'd been mining for free for years, so why not take some profits?
Exactly. And the fact that Binance wasn't in the picture also probably dampened the initial excitement. A lot of people were hoping for that big Binance listing to really launch Pi coin into the stratosphere.
Right. That Binance stamp of approval would have been huge.
Yeah. And one analyst, Kim H. Wong, pointed out that the post-launch trading activity was pretty weak. Lots of selling, not a lot of buying.
So not a lot of new money flowing into Picoin.
Right. Which suggests that maybe people aren't as confident in its long-term value as those optimistic predictions might suggest.
Interesting. So the initial hype might have fizzled out a bit.
Yeah, it's possible. And then there are those more fundamental criticisms of Pi Network itself.
Yeah, let's get into that. What are the biggest concerns that people have about Pi Network?
Well, one of the most common criticisms is that compared to established cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum, Pi doesn't have a lot of real-world utility yet.
Right, we talked about the Pi marketplace and those other potential use cases, but it's still early days.
Exactly. So critics argue that Pi's value is mostly based on speculation right now. People are buying it hoping that it'll be worth a lot more someday, but there aren't many practical uses for it yet.
So the big question is, will they be able to build out that ecosystem of real-world applications fast enough to keep the momentum going?
That's the challenge. And then there's the whole issue of the free mining model.
Yeah, the fact that people have been accumulating Pi at no cost.
Right. And that's led to concerns about a potential price dump in the future. The worry is that once Pi becomes easily tradable on major exchanges, a lot of those early miners might decide to sell off their holdings all at once.
Oh yeah, that would flood the market and drive the price way down.
Exactly. So that's a risk that potential investors have to consider. And just to illustrate how much uncertainty there is, I actually put together a table comparing some of the 2025 price predictions from various sources.
Oh, let's see that.
Okay, so we've got Coin Codex predicting $2.83, Watcher Guru suggesting $3.94.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Binance users, who are actually quite a bit more bearish, putting in an average prediction of 712 cents.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, and some analysts at Brave New Coin have explored scenarios where Pi could reach $1.19, but also more optimistic ones where it could hit $3.50.
So basically, no one really knows what's going to happen.
That's the honest truth.
All right, so we've covered the tech, the potential, the predictions, and the skepticism. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room.
The S word.
Exactly. The scam allegations. These are some pretty serious accusations. Where do they come from, and how much weight should we give them?
Yeah, this is something that everyone considering Pi Network needs to be aware of. One of the most vocal critics is Ben Zhu, the CEO of Bybit, another big crypto exchange.
Bybit, yeah, I've heard of him. So what's his issue with Pi?
He's gone on record calling Pi Network a straight-up scam. Pretty strong words.
Wow, he doesn't mince words?
Nope. And he even pointed to a warning issued by Chinese police back in 2023. They classified Pi Network as a fraudulent scheme that was specifically targeting older individuals.
Targeting older folks, that's pretty low.
Yeah. And they cited concerns about data leaks and the potential for financial losses.
So it's not just some random internet trolls making these accusations.
Yeah.
There are serious players in the crypto world and even law enforcement raising red flags.
Right. And Ben Zhu was very clear that Bybit has absolutely no plans to list Picoin on their exchange.
Ouch, that's got a sting for the Pi team.
Yeah, getting snubbed by a major exchange like Bybit definitely doesn't look good.
And it's not just Ben Zhu, is it?
No, there are others who share his concerns. Justin Bonds, for example.
Who's Justin Bonds?
He's the founder of Cyber Capital, a crypto investment firm. And he's been equally critical of Pi Network, also using that S word.
Okay, so two prominent figures in the crypto space are calling it a scam. What are their specific concerns?
Well, both of them take issue with the mobile mining model. They argue that it doesn't actually contribute to securing the network in any meaningful way.
Oh, interesting. So they're saying it's all just for show, that tapping that button on your phone isn't actually doing anything.
That's their argument. They claim it's more like a multi-level marketing scheme where you're incentivized to recruit more people rather than actually contributing to the network security.
That's a pretty damning assessment.
Yeah. And another major concern is centralization.
Centralization.
Yeah.
Isn't the whole point of cryptocurrency to be decentralized?
Yeah.
Not controlled by any single entity?
That's the ideal, yes. But critics point out that despite all the talk about decentralization, Pi Network's mainnet nodes, those are the computers that are supposed to be independently verifying transactions, are all actually controlled by the Pi core team.
So they're essentially running the whole show.
It appears that way, yes. Which goes against the core principles of a lot of people in the crypto space.
Yeah, if you're not truly decentralized, are you really a cryptocurrency? It definitely raises some questions about Pi Network's long-term commitment to those core values.
It does. And those accusations, coming from respected figures in the crypto industry, definitely add fuel to the fire.
Definitely makes you think twice about getting involved. Okay, another thing that's raised eyebrows about Pi Network is the KYC process. What's the deal with that? Why is it so controversial?
Well, as you know, KYC, Know Your Customer, is pretty standard in the crypto world these days. Exchanges and platforms are required to verify their users' identities to comply with anti-money laundering regulations.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain, but I get why they do it.
Right. But the controversy with Pi Network's KYC process is that it potentially involves sharing your personal information with other users.
Wait, what? Explain that.
So, to migrate your Pi to the mainnet and receive any referral bonuses, you have to go through this KYC process. You submit a selfie video and a photo of your government ID. Pretty standard stuff.
Right.
But the thing is, this information can potentially be reviewed and verified by other Pi Network users who volunteer as validators.
Whoa, hold on. So my sensitive personal data could be seen by random people on the internet.
That's the concern, yeah.
That's a pretty big privacy red flag.
Yeah, a lot of people are uncomfortable with that level of data sharing, especially considering that Pi's value and utility are still unproven. They're basically being asked to trust a bunch of strangers with their personal information.
And on top of that, there are concerns about the app itself, right? Like the permissions it requests.
Oh yeah, the Pi Network app asks for a pretty wide range of permissions on your phone, including access to your contacts.
That's definitely a bit creepy. Why would a mining app need access to my contacts?
It's not entirely clear, and that lack of transparency has definitely fueled the privacy concerns.
Yeah, I can see why people would be hesitant to hand over all that information.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the scam allegations, the centralization concerns, and the privacy issues. Is there anything else that Pi Network needs to worry about?
Oh yeah, let's not forget about regulation.
Ah, yes, the regulatory maze. Cryptocurrency and governments haven't always been the best of friends.
That's putting it mildly. And navigating the global regulatory landscape is a huge challenge for any crypto project, especially one with ambitions as big as Pi Network's.
So what specific regulatory hurdles are they facing?
Well, for starters, remember how Binance hasn't listed Picoin yet.
Yeah, we talked about that. They haven't really given a clear reason why.
Right. But it's widely believed that regulatory concerns are a major factor. Binance is very careful about which coins they list, and they don't want to get on the wrong side of regulators in any country.
Makes sense. They're playing it safe.
Exactly. And remember those Chinese police warnings we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the ones calling Pi a fraudulent scheme.
Right. That kind of negative attention from law enforcement is definitely going to make exchanges hesitant to get involved. They don't want to risk facilitating something that could be deemed illegal.
Yeah, that's understandable. So what about other countries? Are there any specific regulatory challenges they're facing around the world?
Oh yeah, tons. The regulatory landscape for crypto is incredibly complex. Different countries have different rules, and some are much stricter than others. For example, in some countries, Pi's referral system, where you earn more Pi by inviting new users, could potentially be interpreted as a pyramid scheme, which is illegal.
Oh, yeah, that's a tricky area. Anything else?
Well, there are countries where cryptocurrency trading itself is banned or heavily restricted. So if Pi Network wants to operate in those countries, they're going to have to figure out how to comply with those regulations. And we've even seen reports of some smaller exchanges like BitGet temporarily suspending Picoin trading, explicitly citing regulatory challenges and security concerns.
So they're facing regulatory pressure from multiple angles. Sounds like they've got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, regulatory compliance is a huge headache for any crypto project, but especially one that's trying to operate on a global scale.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've looked at the tech, the community, the potential, the criticisms, and the regulatory challenges. It's a pretty complex picture, isn't it?
It really is.
So with all that in mind, let's try to distill it down to the essentials. What are the key factors that will determine whether Pi Network succeeds or fails in the long run?
Okay, well, I think the most important factor is utility. Can Picoin actually be used for anything in the real world?
Right. Does it have real-world value beyond just speculation?
Exactly. If they can't build out that ecosystem of practical applications, the whole thing might just fizzle out. They need to convince people that Pi is more than just a digital collectible. It needs to be something you can actually use to buy goods and services.
So utility is number one. What else?
Scarcity. They've got a fixed supply of 100 billion Pi coins. But how do they manage that supply over time?
Yeah, how do they ensure that Pi retains its value, that it doesn't just become inflated and worthless?
Right. They've got some mechanisms in place like the declining mining rate and the voluntary lockup system, but they need to be carefully managed.
Okay, so utility and scarcity. Anything else?
Adoption.
Yeah.
Getting those 60 million registered users to actually use Picoin regularly.
Yeah, turning those casual users into active participants in the Pi economy.
And even more importantly, getting businesses to accept Pi as payment. That's the real test of adoption.
Right. Can't just be a closed loop within the Pi community. It needs to break out into the wider world.
Exactly.
And finally, there's the whole issue of market sentiment.
Right.
Public perception and trust.
Absolutely. If people don't believe in the project, if they think it's a scam, it's not going to succeed, no matter how good the tech is or how many potential use cases there are.
So Pi Network needs to do some serious damage control.
They do. They need to address those scam allegations head on, be more transparent about their operations, and build trust with the wider crypto community.
It's a tall order. So there you have it. The future of Pi Network is uncertain, to say the least.
It's a fascinating experiment, but only time will tell if it ultimately succeeds.
Well, this has been a truly deep dive into the world of Pi Network. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical details to the wild predictions to the very real concerns about its legitimacy.
It's a story with a lot of twists and turns.
It certainly is, and it's a story that's still being written. So to our listeners, we leave you with this question. What do you think is the single most important factor that will determine Pi Network's fate? Is it utility? Is it scarcity? Is it adoption? Or is it simply a matter of overcoming those negative perceptions and building trust? We encourage you to keep digging, keep asking questions, and form your own informed opinion.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to explore here.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be looking back this conversation and wondering how we ever doubted Pi Network's potential. Or maybe we'll be shaking our heads and saying, "We told you so." Only time will tell. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening, everyone.